Welcome back to the Todd Durkin Impact Show, the podcast dedicated to lighting you up with inspiration, motivating you to be better in all areas of your life, and igniting action inside of you so that you can ultimately create more impact in this world that so desperately needs you. On every Impact Show, we dive into mindset, health set, leadership, and something personal so that I can coach you to be the very best version of yourself. With that, it's time to dive into today's Impact Show episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Todd Durkin Impact Show. And I am so excited to have you on the show today, listening in, tuning in, because you have one heck of an episode and convo coming up today. Now, you got to listen to this one because this gentleman today, who I call Raz, Razgaitis, is a special man who he's got tremendous entrepreneurial experience, one that you're going to hear throughout the show. And not only is the founder and CEO of a company called FloWater, but he's worked with several very large companies, some of which you're gonna recognize the names. And I always value when I have the opportunity to speak with another leader, someone who is an entrepreneur, pioneer in his industry and what he's doing, yet also very mission-driven. This guy, Raz, man, he is a mission-driven, passionate, purpose-driven soul who's on fire to change the planet. And when I say that, I mean it. Wait till you hear Raz and what he has to say and what he's doing. But so I can give him his proper due. Take a listen to his bio. Razgaitis is revolutionizing how the world hydrates by turning tap water into a premium, crave-worthy experience. As the co-founder and CEO of FloWater, Raz is driving a global movement to eliminate single-use plastic bottles, already surpassing 1 billion saved. That's a lot. While completely reimagining how consumers perceive tap water. FloWater's refill stations use a 7x, a 7 times advanced purification process, delivering not just the safest and best tasting water, it really is, but a full brand experience. Under Raz's visionary leadership, FloWater has become the gold standard in trust, taste, and sustainability. With over 10,000 refill stations nationwide, FloWater serves renowned brands like Google, the Four Seasons, Coachella, the Miami Dolphins, Fitness Quest 10, and Todd Durkin Enterprises. That's right. Yes, he does a great job with that. Raz's unwavering commitment to providing all humans access to water they can trust while drastically reducing plastic pollution earned him the Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Mountain West Award in 2024, amongst many other accolades. And lastly, before co-founding FloWater, Raz built a reputation for driving transformative growth, scaling a nutrition company from $30 million to $100 million in just 2 years. Man. Revitalizing a legacy pharmaceutical company and launching and selling 2 successful tech startups. Raz started his career in the Fortune 500 pharma world at Johnson & Johnson and Eli Lilly before coming over to the other side. Beyond his business achievements, Raz is a devoted father of 2 and an avid adventurer, enjoying motorcycling and snowboarding in Denver, Colorado, where he calls home. Man, that is one heck of an impressive bio. I want to tell you this, as you listen into today's show, I hope you're tuned in. You may want to listen to this thing twice because of the amount of content that you're going to receive in this. Now, you're going to think I'm sponsored by FloWater. No, I am not sponsored by FloWater in any way. I have just, since using and bringing FloWater into Fitness Quest 10, have been pleasantly surprised about the number of people coming up to the roots, where right here the podcast show takes part here. People coming up just to get the darn water from the FloWater tank because it's that good. So when I was introduced to Raz, the CEO, I want to give him a special thanks before he comes on to the show for flying out from Denver, Colorado to be here live for the podcast, because as he grows his voice and his mission and passion manifests and grows even bigger, it's a real honor to have him live in studio with me today. So without further ado, let's go to the show now with Razgaitis. Raz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Todd. Appreciate it.
I love having you in. Thank you for coming in all the way from Denver in studio.
Happy to do it.
Guys, we're in studio. We're live with Raz, and he spends a lot of his time in Denver. I want to start off personal because
great.
The FloWater I could talk about all day because we're going to talk health, fitness, wellness, all this stuff here today. But you talk about transforming a lot of these businesses. You also have a family, right? So talk about how you balance all this entrepreneurial pursuits over many years to now also trying to balance out your family.
Yeah. Well, I've done it poorly at various times as well. So like, it'd be really nice to be able to start and say, well, I did this, I did that. And I'm killing it over here. My family has always been thrilled with me. I can rewind to, when I was in college. I mean, when I was in college, my dream was I went to a small Christian school in Indiana, very small school.
What was the name of it?
Anderson University.
Okay.
And you ever heard of it?
No.
It's like the Harvard of the Midwest. And it's really not. I just am rebranding it slowly.
There's so many Harvards of the South, Harvards of the Central.
I got to tell a quick funny side story. So I lived in San Francisco for 10 years. No one had ever heard of Anderson University. So I've been saying that just over the years, mostly as a joke. But then I started running into people and they'd be like, oh, I've heard of Anderson as being like the Harvard of the Midwest. And it probably started with me 10 years before, like slowly repositioned this company. It wasn't the Harvard of the Midwest, believe me.
I love it.
But, my goal was, get married, have a bunch of kids, be a corporate guy. I had entrepreneurial ambitions. And then kind of fast forward to 9-10 years ago, then kind of going back to the point of your question of, how do I navigate that? And sometimes it's been poorly. I mean, that's the answer. So I ended up going through a divorce about 10 years ago where I really had to make a decision on doubling down. Am I going to where's my priority going to be? Where, is it going to be self? Is it going to be trying to find a new mate? Is it going to be my kids? Is it going to be my company? I'm going to just bury myself into making my company successful. And as bad as it is for anyone that's gone through a divorce and as brutal as it is, one of the huge blessings that I got out of it was a real mental reset and a reprioritization of, hey, what really matters to you? And my kids, came to the surface. So I basically decided, hey, I'm going to focus on myself in terms of personal growth, development, spiritual relationship, working and getting back into the church. But then the second part of it was, I'm going to go all in on my kids no matter what. No matter what, I'm going to go all in on my kids. And then third, I'm super unbridled around business and the mission and what we're doing to restore America's tap water. But I basically said those two things have to work.
Yep.
In order for this third thing to work. And if something's not going to work, it's going to be the business piece of it.
How old are your kids?
22 and 21.
22
now.
and
so they were
21.
10 and 11 around this time. And this is just a couple of years. I mean, prior to that experience of going through separation, divorce, it was just about 2 years before that co-founded FloWater. So the kids were part of the very early journey of FloWater entrepreneurialism, getting this company into orbit, but then also just going through all the pains of having a changing family dynamic. So I would say, I've gotten this gift, which I've been able to reset my priorities through a very acute interaction or a very kind of acute car crash, in effect, that enabled me to make a different decision about where am I going to prioritize time. Because part of the danger of being an entrepreneur, and I think part of the danger of just being an adult is, well, you think you can get everything done. Like everyone tells you, oh, like everything is possible and whatever you dream. And, certainly I would never be one that want to curtail people's ambitions. But the reality is decisions have opportunity costs to them and they have sacrifices and consequences you have to make. And so for want on something that is positive on one end, there's a gap or some other give up on the other end of it, which is like one of the many reasons why I don't golf. I don't golf, not because I don't love golf, and I'm sure I would get obsessed with it, but I cannot fit
8 hours
that into
right.
Like something has to give. And so for me, I think one of the dangers that I faced as a younger man was, well, I can pull it all off. I can pull the work stuff off. I can pull the fitness stuff off. I can pull my ambition off and the kids and the family and being a great husband. And sometimes you can't, or sometimes you lose track of your way. And so I would say, I wish I could say it was all like sunshine and rainbows right now. It is now, actually, in many ways. My relationship with my kids is great. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the course of time is you pick your priorities and keep showing up. Yep. Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up. And good things will eventually happen, even if it doesn't feel like that.
What do you do now with your kids, knowing you, I'll say, quote, lost time in this whole period of your life? Are there things you prioritize with your kids on a daily or weekly or monthly basis to say, I need to get these 3 things done with my kids to make sure that they are really a priority?
Absolutely, there are. So I remember, I'll give you a few examples. I had a friend of mine. So I'd moved to Denver. My family was going to move to Denver. So I moved ahead and I moved the company ahead. And I came back from a house hunting trip one weekend. And then I found out that my wife at the time no longer wanted to move to Denver, and she didn't really want to be married either. And so I got papers that weekend coming back, and I'd already moved over. So I ended up having to commute for a period of 5 years, every other week, going back and forth between Denver and SF, while also flying 100,000 miles a year for business, while also raising 5 different rounds of venture capital and so a little bit of private equity and sorts of family office, current investor now. So I had to make a decision. What am I going to do that's different going forward to really build a relationship with my kids? And so one of them, I'll just tell you, this is a story I don't think I've shared very many times. I had a friend of mine who said, because I was debating, hey, do I just come back and see my kids on the weekend, and how do I deal with this? And she woke up one day, and it's just a platonic friend of mine for many years. She woke up one day and she said, I had a dream last night that you're supposed to go back to San Francisco, rent a place there, establish a home for your kids so that when you have them 10 days a month, they feel like they have a home, as opposed to me kind of just going back and finding a hotel room and camping out for a weekend and then forcing them to come out to Denver. And literally I was on a plane the next day. I went, rented a place. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of my relationship with my kids. And so some of these are things where you just like, if there's some supernatural voice where someone has a dream and it's so obscure, and they say, and it also falls into this halo of do the right thing, right? Yeah, and so, it's like one example of something that was a major impact. Family dinner every Sunday night, did that. I used to cook all the time for my kids. I cooked mostly growing up for my kids. I was primary chef, and my skills have gotten worse as the business has gotten bigger. But Sunday night, and I still do this with my youngest daughter, who's 21, that lives with me. Now we go out, though. I don't cook so much. And she does not prefer my cooking at this point, because it pretty much consists of making ground beef and broccoli.
I love it.
And so, in my food prep, family dinner, one decision that I made, it's such a simple one, but I remember probably 70% of the time that my kids would call me, I would throw it into voicemail when they were younger, because it's like, like I'd be in a business meeting, I felt like I couldn't walk away, and talking to a customer, talking to an employee, and I'll just text them back, and I'll call them back minutes later. I made a decision that no matter what I was doing, I was always going to be there. If they needed me at home and they called me, I would drop whatever I was doing and I would show up. If they called me, no matter what board meeting, no matter the investor, no matter the customer meeting, I can't tell you, I don't think I missed one phone call from my kids in a period of 8 years. Wow. Now when they call, I'm like, hey, like I might throw it to voicemail. And I'm like, hey, you're 22. So like once in a while they'll tease me. They'll be like, Dad, you used to answer the phone every single time. I was like, well, that had a purpose for a period of years. Now you kind of have to wait and turn in line a little bit.
I love it.
There's a few, those are like simple things of just showing up and being there when your kids need you makes a big impact. And then there's other things as well, but those are 3 examples.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to start with that because it's always interesting when you look at people who are uber busy and successful. You got 80 employees, right, at FloWater now, and you're trying to be a great dad, to them, and it's not always easy. And I know a lot of the entrepreneurs listening in can relate to the fact of how do you balance it all out. It's one of the questions I always get. How do you balance it all out? How do you juggle it? So thank you for sharing that. Today's Todd Durkin Impact Show podcast is brought to you by Impact X Performance. Are you ready to change more lives? Do you want to be part of a dynamic team dedicated to changing the world? And are you ready to step into the next chapter of your life where you can impact even more people? If so, today is the day. That's right, my friends. Impact X Performance is dedicated to be a cutting-edge facility where we can bring you fitness, recovery, faith, and life coaching all under one roof. If you're looking to create even more impact in your community, today is the day. Visit impactxfranchise.com. That's impactxfranchise.com and take a look at all of the opportunities that exist for you to create even more impact. That's impactxfranchise.com. I'll see you there. You have a lot of entrepreneurial experience from, all the different companies that you started or worked for, and sales of different companies as well. The nutrition company, all of it has a lot of entrepreneurial success. I want to start with the FloWater experience and almost reverse engineer it back. What is FloWater? Because most people probably don't even know what FloWater is.
Well, I'll start first with the company and the mission, and then kind of work our way into the product, because I think what we're solving for is not only the most interesting thing, but it's also one of the most pervasive issues that we face in the United States today as it relates to clean drinking water, as well as access to things like healthcare and healthy food, and it's all tied to kind of a fundamental human right. So we exist as a company because we believe it is a fundamental human right to have access to clean drinking water that you can trust. That is a fundamental human right. Everybody should have access to that. And unfortunately, tragically, today in the United States, that right doesn't exist. And there's a bunch of reasons why. Maybe we'll get into some of those reasons of what the issues are with tap water in the United States. But that's why we exist, is to restore America's tap water by providing what we believe to be the world's best tasting, most trusted water anywhere consumers work, rest, and play. There's an issue in the United States today. I'll just give you one example of the materiality of the issue. The reality is, the darker your skin and the poorer you are, the dirtier your water is. Like, that's a travesty. That should not exist. There shouldn't be kind of a income requirement and a geographic requirement in order to have access to clean drinking water. And so we live in a world today where you have to treat your water twice. Municipal does the best job that they possibly can. I think there's some interesting backstory, which we maybe will get into, as to why they have problems in municipal water today that maybe did not quite exist to the degree that it does 30, 40, 50 years ago. But we have a fundamental right and opportunity to do that. And in doing that, we can also do something great for the environment, which is, if we can get people access to clean drinking water, they drink more of it. We can also eliminate or drastically reduce single-use plastic water bottle waste. And single-use plastics are incredibly destructive. You and I, every week right now, are eating, breathing, and drinking one credit card's worth of plastic every single week. Every single week. And there's a bunch of data around microplastics crossing the blood-brain barrier, being found in placentas and umbilical tissue. So we're literally turning into bottled water, even if you're not drinking bottled water. So we have also an opportunity to eliminate that from the environment. But first and foremost, it's really about restoring America's tap water. And to do that, we use a FloWater refill station. And so what we have done—
Explain that, yeah.
So the concept on it, if you look at the problem that exists today, one is we have a fundamental issue with drinking water. 80%, up to 80% of Americans, they either don't like it or don't trust tap water. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, and we can get into that later. But if you just start with that premise, well, then what do? So they reach for bottled water, or they reach for bottled beverage, big beverage companies, carbonated, caffeinated, sugared junk in a can or in a bottle, or energy drinks or whatever it is. So they're finding these substitutes. And the reason they're finding these substitutes is because the products that have been designed over the last 20, 30, 40 years to solve the tap water issue in the United States don't really solve anything. They're just pieces of hardware like water fountains, 5-gallon jugs, point-of-use water coolers. Yeah. These are these black box water coolers that you find in your office. So if consumers don't trust tap water, those machines or devices don't impart any trust. They're just another delivery agent for basically plain old tap water, which consumers don't like. So what we did is we said, hey, effectively, how would Apple approach a water fountain or a hydration station? Or how would Tesla how would someone that wants to reinvent a category and get people to fall in love with drinking water and tap water, how would they recreate this? So we spent 7 figures, a lot of time, a lot of teardowns on other pieces of hardware in the thousands and thousands of there's 10 million pieces of hardware in the market. So we looked at the top 10 companies that are producing the 10 million pieces of hardware in the market. Why are they not working? How do we solve that? And how do we make this not only the world's best tasting, most trusted water, but a cool experience? Because at the end of the day, people like brands. Like, brand association denotes trust, confidence, affinity. And so creating a brand around the technology was an important part of this as well, so that we actually do something that people will gravitate towards and want to do.
Explain the tap water piece, though.
Yeah.
So it's not just another, jug of water.
Right.
Explain how it works, because I know when we got our FloWater earlier this year, explain how it works.
Okay. So can I do a little backstory on tap water?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I used to drink tap water growing up.
Well, I did too. I drank it out of a hose. You probably did as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was perfectly acceptable back then. It's probably a lot cleaner back then as well. And so today in the United States, there are well over 50,000 chemicals in use in manufacturing, agriculture, et cetera. Over 50,000 chemicals in use in the United States today. Take a guess how many of those are regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, which has hardly been updated in the last 50 years, by the way. I mean, half a dozen
That's
updates.
how I was drinking all the water.
Yeah. So of those 50,000 plus chemicals, you want to take a guess how many are regulated into your drinking water?
50%.
94. 94 chemicals, not 94%. 94 out of the many tens of thousands of chemicals that are in use in the United States.
Shoot.
This is a problem. This is a huge problem.
94 out of 50,000.
Out of 50,000 plus. The number is actually closer to 80,000.
Wow.
So when you look at the
This
issue,
is documented.
Yeah, Google it. You Google it, document it. Lead, another example. I'll give you just one, and I could give 10 examples of this. I'm not going to give 10, but I'll give you another one. Lead. So everyone's talking about Flint many years ago. Tragic crisis. We actually donated about $60,000 worth of FloWater refill stations to Flint, Michigan. In fact, we were taking source water that was the color of urine that was running into a FloWater machine, and out would run undetectable levels of lead in a FloWater device as a result of the purification, which I'll get to in a second. But in the last 5 years, there have been over 3,000 communities whose populations have tested for higher levels per person of lead content in their bodies than the highest recorded levels in Flint, Michigan. So Flint just happened to get, they had a pervasive issue. It was a massive issue, but it's the tip of the spear. It was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the story in many ways. And so over 50% of Americans in the last 5 years have been drinking water with lead in it. Today, this is as a parent, you should be appalled by this. There is no federal mandate for lead testing when you send your kids to school and they're consuming the drinking water. Now, certain municipalities, cities, states have regulated and mandated that. Still to this day, there's no federal mandate on the acceptable amount of lead that can be in the tap water. In fact, whatever the EPA says it is today, American Academy of Pediatrics says the only acceptable safe dose of lead for kids is 0 parts per billion. It's 0. It's not 1, it's not 3, it's not 5. I think it's going to be 5 in the year 2027. It's 0. And so we have a fundamental issue in the United States today, not only with all these chemicals, glyphosate, Roundup, commonly found in your drinking water, didn't exist 50 years ago. It just came into existence about 50 years ago. Microplastics, nanoplastics, it's all in tap water. So going back to your question, what does this solve for? FloWater solves for all of that. So this is a system that basically does 3 things. One is it extracts everything from tap water, up to 99.99% of chemicals, pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides. Then it remineralizes it. So once that water is clean and purified, and it's literally just H2O or as close to H2O as you can get, then it gets remineralized, kind of gets activated with things like calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and then it's run through a coconut carbon filter, which makes it taste great. The key to making FloWater work is so this is the lousy thing about sustainability. Sometimes people say, hey, do you run a sustainability company? And often my answer is no. I run a company that delivers a best-in-class product that consumers love that also happens to be good for the environment. Because when I say sustainability, what kind of comes to mind? Or if I were to tell you, hey, this product is sustainable, what comes up in your mind? Does anything trigger? Because I can tell you what ends up happening with a lot of consumers.
What is it?
So people tend to think, I'll use paper straws as an example. So everyone can rally around save the sea turtles, and no one wants to see a sea turtle have a plastic straw go through its nose.
Right.
But then suddenly when you're drinking out of paper straw and it's melting in your mouth and your drink doesn't make it, that's a problem for a consumer. That they might say, listen, I love the sea turtles and I want to save this, but I want to save my drink.
Right.
And that's actually how it's a little bit like Abraham Lincoln's quote during the Civil War, where I think he said something to the effect of, when 10,000 people die, it's a statistic, but when one person dies, it's a tragedy. It's the personalization of an experience. And so going back to the sustainability piece, you can't expect someone to do something good for purely philosophical reasons if it doesn't materially benefit them. So if I go in and say, hey, you're terrible for drinking a single-use plastic water bottle, drink this instead, you're going to have to, it's a little bit, another parallel real quick. It's a little bit like being an early Prius owner, of which I was one, but like you're compromising, it doesn't ride good. The new ones are different, but I'm talking like circa 2004, 2007, I had a 2007. It's super slow. It doesn't look cool. It's not comfortable. Like I still think I have back problems from that Prius, but it's good for the environment. And that's not a good equation. So Tesla flip that, right? Which is like, hey, here's a badass car. It's cool. It's fast. It looks cool. It's comfortable, and it happens to be good for the environment. And that's the take that we tried to apply and have applied to FloWater, which is how do we get consumers something that they will obsessively love more than their favorite bottle of water? And then they'll make the switch, right? If they do something that's in their own best interest and it happens to be good for the environment. And so that's the approach that we've taken with FloWater.
Let me ask the dumb question, because obviously as the co-founder and CEO of FloWater, you believe in FloWater, of course. But then you're going to have people that say, well, I drink the best water. There's 3, 4, 5 brands from the bottled water. What would you say, like, why is FloWater a better water than some of the other leading brands in the bottled industry?
Well, the first thing I would say about drinking out of a bottle is that microplastics are a serious issue. It's microplastic. So let me just start with explaining some of the dynamics of plastics. First of all, big oil, all of this kind of stems back to big oil and many years ago. In fact, there was stuff that was previously redacted and it's been made public where big oil was the kind of agonist to this story about recycling, even though they knew recycling wouldn't work and people wouldn't recycle. In the recycling system, I don't know if you know this, but the vast majority of whatever you throw in the blue bin, and when I say vast majority, I mean 90% of it, does not make its way through reclamation. It ends up in oceans, lakes, rivers, and landfills. It does not go through the recycling process. It doesn't. That is a truism almost across the board, regardless of the market.
Really?
Did you know that?
No.
So like this is, and there's a lot
That's a fact.
That's a fact. I mean, good. You can Google this stuff.
This is
In
good.
fact,
We're getting a lot of good new facts here. I like this.
There was a recent, I think it was I forget what city, I forget what mayor of what city filed a lawsuit based upon this premise, which is this stuff doesn't get recycled. And so it was a lawsuit against big oil, or it was plastic manufacturers. I forget exactly what it was. But stuff. So the vast majority of people don't recycle. So about 80% of Americans don't even throw it in the blue bin, metaphorically. It's like literally in some cases, metaphorically others, because there's a green bin, et cetera. Of the stuff that gets thrown in the blue bin, the vast majority of that doesn't make it through the full reclamation process. Part of it is because you're mixing, this is not a finger pointing at municipality either. Part of it is people are throwing all sorts of stuff in the bins, right? Like that it shouldn't be in there. You have to separate it. And then there's certain heat processing. You have to raise it to a certain level of heat for a certain type of plastic in order for it to degrade. But plastics do not biodegrade, they photodegrade. So what ends up happening is one bottle turns into 2 pieces, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, all the way down to microplastics, which is 1 micron in size. And then it keeps splitting. It keeps becoming smaller in particles. So nanoplastics are anything smaller than 1 microplastic. There's data now that shows a bottled water drinker, someone that drinks bottled water, if you care about water quality and your health and your longevity, you do not want to drink out of a single-use plastic water bottle, because that's basically just disintegrating and carrying microplastics that are lining your stomach and your small and large intestine and your kidneys. And some of that stuff doesn't make its way out of you. And so there's some data that shows that bottled water drinkers end up ingesting up to 10,000 times the number of plastics and microplastics as a non-bottled water drinker. So if you drink bottled water, I know exactly why you do it. It's because you like the taste, it's clean, you like the mouthfeel, you trust it, you don't like your tap water. These are all reasons, but all of these things exist. Like, we don't have a problem in the United States called, if I could only find a faucet. That's not the problem we have in the US. Like, no one's like wandering around saying like, how do I find a water device? The problem that we have in the United States is people do not like or trust what's coming out of that faucet. If we can change that and make it better than what you would find in a bottle, that's unwrapped, not wrapped in plastic, but in steel, glass, whatever it is, then we have solved a multitude of issues. Downstream, we've saved this huge environmental issue. But upstream, we've saved and restored your health by not basically turning yourself into a plastic particle.
Yeah. So how have you done that though with FloWater? Because what you were telling me before we got the cameras rolling was a large portion of FloWater is going to companies, right?
Yes.
Not home market. So how does that solve the?
Well, so there's a lot of market to solve. So right now, what we decided, so this is like one of the hard things. Like when people hear 80 people, they're like, "That's a lot," and I'm like, "Look, like it's a big responsibility, but we're in a David and Goliath scenario right now, which is why the thing that's pulled us along, by the way, and I'll get back to the consumer piece in a second, but the thing that's pulled this business along is obsession and love for the FloWater product and the brand. And it's not just the brand, but it's the taste of the water, it's the quality of the water, where people start demanding this. They go into their gym, their hotel, their kids' school. They're saying, "Hey, I want this. I am willing to pay for this. As a consumer, I'm going to put my money behind companies that are supporting products that I end up loving." You know, it's a little bit like your personal training business, probably in your gym, which is if you have great personal trainers, then people have even if they're not getting personal training, it's a litmus for, is this the type of environment that I want to situate myself in, and am I willing to pay for this? So on the consumer side, we have pretty much stayed away for the most part from the home at this point. Like so far at this point, our focus as a business is to restore and dramatically change drinking water in hotels, schools, gyms, corporations, retailers, warehouses. So any business greater than 10, 20, 30 people. We've got a number of companies that you mentioned: Google, Electronic Arts, Discovery, Warner Brothers. We do Coachella every year. So we've done 1,000 music festivals and other types of events over the course of the last 10 plus years. But our goal is to build the brand where there are a lot of consumers having transients, right? You're walking into a hotel, or schools are a great example. So there was a press release, Steph Curry Foundation just donated, and they've been great partners. Steph Curry Foundation just donated another 88 units into Oakland schools. Awesome. So over the last 6 years, Oakland will, by the end of this month or the end of this quarter, they're going to have over 350 FloWater units that have completely restored that school and access to clean drinking water. And what happens when we do that is kids drink more water, they drink less soda, they drink less energy drinks. So we can make a huge impact with a multiplier effect by going into B2B.
Why are you so passionate about this? It's clear that you're passionate about it. You speak eloquently about it.
It's my kids. And I'll tell you the experience that happened. So I'm like getting so excited that I'm like spitting on your table.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's great. Listen,
I spit on this table every day.
Yeah, that's great. Well, then I'm going to leave you with some of my DNA. I was 40 years old, and I went living in San Francisco. I've been in San Francisco for like 5 years at that point. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Like I grew up very Midwest, middle class. I went to a pretty rural college, and that I mentioned earlier. So I grew up in a very middle class environment for the most part. I mean, I had a lot of opportunity presented to me along the way, and I had parents that really appreciated and valued education and pushed me towards that. So I had a lot of those things that were going for me. But my point ultimately is, I grew up thinking, well, people in SF, like, all those kids probably just drink wheatgrass juice and eat bark as snacks and like whatever. Like, I just thought this is a California thing. Like no one eats Twinkies and drinks Red Bulls and all that stuff. And I since we're on a long form podcast, I'll tell a little bit of a longer form story around this. I was in really good shape through college, played football in college, never had to worry about what I ate, what I drank. It's not a big alcoholic drinker, but like big soda consumer. And I never had to worry about it. So, it's always like 6'3", 220, like just 230 in good shape. And then before I knew it, I was 28, obviously no longer playing football. And I was like 280, 285 and really out of shape. And I basically drank my calories and completely, reconstructed my body, not in favorable ways. So I went through this like whole journey myself of having this holy crap, I've been programmed in ways like, that expression, you probably have said it before, and it's kind of an adage in the fitness industry, is you can't outwork a bad diet.
Oh yeah.
That's true, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was me. I was still working out, but like there was no way I was coming close to outworking the amount of calories that I was ingesting, doing dinners, eating junk food, cravings, soda. So I ended up having this transformation, dropped about 60 pounds, 70 pounds, started running marathons regularly, ended up doing an Ironman. And that was like a big personal revelation for me. And that happened right like 38, 39, 40. I was 40 years old, fast forward to going back to my kid's soccer game. I'd never really noticed before, but then I saw my kids, like they'd win a game and afterwards everyone would like break out the energy drinks or the sodas and they get the Twinkies or like whatever it was. And I was like, holy crap, my kids are like, we all got programmed of, you do something good, you're going to get rewarded, and you're getting rewarded with junk. And that junk actually is very addictive. I mean, you look at RJR, owns a food company, and they instill, I'm convinced, and I think the data is really clear, that they're experts at making addictive products and incorporating chemicals. And they've done that in the food supply as well. I mean, this is, to some degree, it's self-control and discipline and will. Part of it, though, is you're being chemically composted to become addicted to things. And sugar has the same neural receptors as heroin does. So it's hitting parts of the brain that are really addictive. And that is what I became obsessed over, which is breaking the chain where all of these behaviors and all of these activities are getting programmed. My kids, your kids, America's kids, all of our kids. How do we stop that? And how do we get kids to just do the basic healthy things? We grew up drinking out of a hose. What is wrong with getting our kids off of things like energy drinks, Coke, Pepsi? The only people that don't like that are the big beverage companies. They hate that idea because they profit off of it. In fact, you end up getting it's a little bit like banks marketing to kids and credit cards in college. Why do they do that? Because the area under the curve over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years is so significant. The profitability is massive. Right. So you just like proceed that same thing with, big sugary beverage companies. Of course you want a 13-year-old locked in. You want them locked.
Yep.
You get them for decades. Or if you don't get them for decades, at least you get them for 3, 5, 10 years. That's what I got fired up about, which is our kids are getting programmed today in ways that we have to dismantle this and do something dramatic, and it will benefit them for many years to come.
But how do you go from sitting on the sideline watching them? It's funny. I'm laughing because I can see the vision right now of the post game celebrations and the coolers opening up, and you're like, well, you just did something great for your bodies, and now you're filling it with garbage. Right. I see it all the time. But how do you go from that parent seeing that to, hey, let me start a beverage company?
Well, so the aha for me was that moment, but then. So then I started reading and researching, it dawned on me, my kids don't drink that much water. And then I remember asking them like, hey, why don't you ever drink water out of the faucet? Because they all carried around, like back then it was like hydro flasks or Swell bottles, and now it maybe is Stanley. But like all the kids and adults for that matter, they care about the bottle that their water is being carried in more than they recognize the stuff that's going in this bottle is way more important than the brand or the aesthetics on what's outside this bottle. So I remember, asking them, like, why don't you drink out of the faucet? Like I drank out of the faucet growing up. You drank out of the faucet. It's like, that's how you got your water, right? That's right? I mean, if you wanted something to drink, you're drinking out of the kitchen faucet, the bathroom sink, it didn't matter. Yep. And they're like, well, Dad, it's disgusting. It's gross. Like it tastes bad. It's bad. It's got chemicals in it. Like they knew all this stuff kind of preceding even like mainstream stuff and part of it was intuitive. And so that basically led to kind of a proliferation of discoveries around, okay, well, why don't people trust drinking water, and why is bottled water growing so pervasively, and why does big soda continue to grow in the face of access? Why are 70% of Americans chronically dehydrated? And it all really comes back to, we have a water problem in the United States today. Like we don't have a water access problem. We have a water trust and taste problem. And that opens the gateway for all of these other things. You get food cravings. One of the reasons that you get food cravings is because you're dehydrated. So when you're getting a craving for food, your body thinks that you have a food craving, or your mind thinks you have a food craving. What your body really needs in some cases is just hydration. And you just happen to get it out of food so much that it's gotten conditioned to say, well, if I go eat X, Y, and Z, or if I go have a bowl of whatever and cereal, that at least is going to get some hydration into my body. And so I got passionate about solving something at a really systemic level. So if you look at like 3 or 4 levels of life and how do you drastically change your life, spiritual certainly is one of them. Sleep is another one of them. Water and hydration is another one. And then working out is another. And then finally, the 5th one would be food, like what you consume. Water ends up being one of these pillars that if you can change that, you can change somebody's life.
Interesting. Because I think about dehydration. I'm like, how many people, I've said this for years, how many people are dehydrated? It seems like the majority of the population is probably dehydrated. Is there a stat on that?
70%.
70%.
And what's interesting about it is,
Wow.
I didn't know this going into it. I just did a lot of research. So it's about 70% of Americans chronically dehydrated. It's about the same percentage worldwide. So you might think, Americans must be, less dehydrated because they've got access to drinking water, and in other parts of the world, access to water is a lot more difficult. So it's about 70% both in the US as well as worldwide, and with kids it's about 70%.
And that's a deeper discussion, because that goes into why they dehydrate. Is it not drinking enough water or quality water, or is it all the sugar, the coffee, the alcohol
exactly
that further dehydrates you, right? But it's a double-edged sword. What I don't want to go down is the whole like big pharma coming in because they're hooking us on sugars and all that stuff. Yeah, it's man. So what would be your tips that you use for yourself in ensuring that you drink enough water?
Okay. So one is so this goes back to, your earlier question, which I think I kind of answered, might not have fully answered, about what's different about FloWater versus what's in a bottle. And I tried to answer that in a general sense of, hey, you want to stay away from anything that's in a plastic bottle. But the first thing that I would say is, investing, we spend so much time in this world paying for things that don't generate a very good ROI. So do I like going to a coffee shop and getting a $7 latte? I do. I don't do it every day, but I like doing it once a week, right? But we spend so much money on so many things that don't really have a great ROI. Water is one of the best ways that if you were to invest, $2, $3, $5 a day, it is one of the best. Sleep, working out, water, food, those are great things to invest in. And if you do it smartly, it's not going to cost that much more, or in some cases it'll cost less than what you're paying otherwise. So the first thing that I would say is you need to filter your water. Don't drink it out of a bottle, but I would also say do not drink it out of the tap. Like, because of all the reasons that I mentioned, lead, pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides, it doesn't taste good generally. San Diego, where we are today, has some of the worst tasting water in the country. It has TDS levels that are around 700 parts per million. Anything over 100 parts per million you can taste. So you can imagine if like 100 is where it starts to taste bad, you're at 700 here. You need to filter and ideally purify your water. Now, once you get something that tastes great and purified, by the way, if you're Googling it, I would just Google the difference between filtration and purification. If we have time, I can explain it. But purified water is really what you want, because that removes all of the bad stuff and it gives you the closest thing, or actually true H2O. So first you got to just make sure you trust your water and you like it, because if you don't like it, you're not going to do it. Like, it's that simple. It's a little bit like a workout, right? Which is like if someone hates lifting weights, but they love doing HIIT, and there's some type of derivative of that, well, like, it's easier to find a HIIT program for them, I imagine, than it is to try to convince them to love weights. And maybe you back them into it a little bit. Is that true?
That's true.
Yeah. Okay. So the same thing, which is like, you got to end up trusting and loving what you're drinking. Second thing is start early. So what I do is I have a glass, 1 gallon jug. So 1 gallon is the amount that I drink. So it's about 1 ounce, half your body weight in ounces is a general recommendation, right? So you 200 pounds, drink about 100 ounces of water every day. A little bit more, a little bit less, depending on your activity level. If you're really getting after it in the gym, or 2-3 workouts a day, then you're going to need more than that. So the second thing, beyond just making sure you got great quality water, is make sure you're drinking, what the quantity is that you need to drink. And then third, I fill my quantity up every morning using a FloWater machine, and I have a big gallon jug, and I'm constantly refilling this 800 ml bottle. But I just have a visual, it's not very easy to drink out of it, but I have a visual measurement. And then the fourth thing is I got to start early. So I do not drink coffee, tea, anything until I've had my first 750, 800 ml bottle of water, to just like reset my digestive system, helps wake me up, ensures like I don't like start hitting cortisol receptors with heavy doses. I love coffee, but I don't want to like burn out my cortisol and my begin my day I already start hyped up enough. I don't need like 3 or 4 shots of espresso. I do. Well, I don't know. Maybe not as hyped as you. I mean, you're a high energy guy, but so start early, because if you get a couple of these under your belt by noon, the rest of the day is easy. If you try to catch up starting at 2:00, you're going to be miserable. And the fourth thing is, don't drink into the evening. So there's a hydration drinking interval that's good, and there's a bad one. So one is, I avoid 30 minutes before and after meals. Like, I don't want to dilute my stomach acids. Stomach acids are designed to be able to break down the food and whatever you're ingesting. You want that to do its job. So a lot of people will like drink a ton of water at lunch. It doesn't make sense to do that. Really, what you should be doing is before, after. Some rules are like more like 30 minutes before, 90 minutes after. I just think it's too long of a window. So I kind of just follow 30 before, 30 after a meal. And then I try to stop drinking water at 7 at night. And that's just because it's miserable. If you're getting up all night long to go to the bathroom because like you try to get your gallon in between 4 and 8 p.m., you're going to be a miserable person the next day. So don't do that. So start early, find quality water, start early, keep it consistent. I don't, your water assimilates slowly into your body. So I try sipping throughout the hour as opposed to like drinking half of this in one slug and then hitting it later.
Those are great practical tips, by the way.
Thanks.
Great practical tips, because you hear them, but I bet you, as you listen to that, you probably had 2 swigs or 3 swigs of your water just because you hear it and you swig your water. And if it's not in your hands or near you, you're probably not always going to go get it.
Right.
So I think when you have your bottle of water there and you drink, you hear that like, yeah, I need to do a better job drinking water. It might be something you want to recommit to in that. So thank you for sharing that. Very simple, not easy, simple, but not easy tips to drink more water on a regular basis. And I really like that 30-minute window before and after your meals, so you can focus on the meal digestion and then have enough water, obviously, in your system during that time.
Today's Impact Show podcast is sponsored by my friends over at eCore Athletic Flooring, my chosen brand when it comes to all of our flooring needs inside of Impact X Performance. My friends, there's 3 reasons why. Number 1, it's a premium brand, and we want our clients and members to have best in class when it comes to flooring. 2, sustainability. That's right, sustainability. It's made by upcycling used commercial tires, and eCore Athletic reclaims over 430 million pounds of waste rubber each year. Now that, my friends, is sustainability. And number 3, performance. And I love performance. With excellent shock absorption, slip resistance, and long-lasting durability, eCore Athletic Flooring is engineered to work hard and play hard. Whether you're designing or remodeling your fitness center, weight room, or yoga studio, rest assured that eCore Athletic Flooring is safe, easy to care for, and can keep up with the pace no matter what your activity is. Check them out at ecoreathletic.com/Todd-Durkin. Once again, check it out. I got a special surprise there for you. Go to ecoreathletic.com/Todd-Durkin. Check it out today.
The one thing that's interesting, and I want to just shift it a tad into the business side, because you have a lot of business and entrepreneurial experience because of all you've done, including with FloWater in the last, how many years now?
It'll be 13.
13 years.
13 this spring.
13 on that. Obviously, in running a mission-centered and mission-driven company and having a deep purpose, it's obvious you have a mission, you have a purpose. What is the purpose of FloWater? Can you reiterate that? The mission.
Really, it's to provide the world with access to the cleanest, best tasting water anywhere consumers work, rest, and play, free of plastics. And to do our part to eliminate single-use plastic water bottles, because this ends up being a market shift. This shift will happen. It is happening. And we just want to be an agonist to that. We want to help drive that, but there are going to be other people that come involved as part of that involvement.
Have you ever had a time in your career where the mission not changed, because it probably didn't change, but it was challenged, or you had a thought of, maybe I need to go in a different direction? Sometime you fell flat on your face with what you were saying. I'm just curious, because I'm always driving mission, but have you in all your different walks and industries? You have
Yeah.
some in your nutrition company. I don't know what company that was, but you have quote some big pharma companies, and now you're living a much different life. Anything on that mission thing that speaks to you?
Well, I mean, for sure, I have a lot of instances where things didn't go according to plan, or I failed at something, or I was responsible for the failure of it. Things that challenged the mission along the way. I think, anytime you're doing something that's different, when I think about today in the market today versus 10, 12, 13 years ago, the naysayers are a lot more voluminous and louder in the early years. And a lot of people, a lot of these people are in the cheap seats too, which is, I heard someone say once to me, I don't totally agree with this, but they said, never take advice from someone that doesn't have to suffer the consequences of that advice. And, it's one of those things where I like getting a lot of feedback and sounding boards and advice from people, but I would never let them make the decision. I mean, anytime I feel like I've failed in my life, it's when I've almost defaulted my own personal accountable decision and reverted to somebody else and what they thought I should do. Now, by the way, let me be really clear. I've also made many decisions that were really bad on my own. So I
of course.
So I don't want to make it sound like all my bad decisions are a result of that. I've made plenty of my own bad decisions. But generally speaking, though, if I've kind of outsourced my decision making based on someone's influence or their skepticism or their cynicism, I've always regretted it. I don't know if it ended up being the right or wrong decision. So part of it is you got to be really convicted to your principles, but also be willing to listen. So I got to tell you, there's a guy named Charlie Menefee. He's kind of like a brother now to me, but he's been in the water business for many years. And I remember talking to him like year 2 in FloWater, and he was a very successful, still is, person in the water hardware industry. And Charlie, the first 3 years I talked to Charlie used to tell me like how every idea that I was executing on was a terrible idea and why it wasn't going to work. And he wanted me to be successful. Like he wanted to help, but he was trying to help me avoid pitfalls. And so, I felt like that was a really big gift to me, which is when you find somebody that's willing to speak truth to you and what they believe, but they don't feel like they need to force it on you, it's incredibly freeing, because then you have the perspective of, it's almost like it's like being in a healthy relationship with a spouse or with your kids or parents, which is for them to be able to isolate and identify your blind spots, but not to drive their ego into it or try to drive their decision.
True.
That's revelatory. And so it requires a degree of like maturity and humility that you can develop over time by getting your butt kicked over many years, where you're like, hey, like I'm going to listen to this and lean into it. And so I think staying, it sounds so trite, but like having a conviction and sticking with that conviction. But then Peter Attia, do you know who Peter Attia is?
Of course.
Yeah. So Peter Attia calls his scientific convictions basically loosely held convictions. So not all of them, but if he believes something, he's like, hey, this is a loosely held conviction, which is I'm convicted in this, but I will change my opinion if I see something that causes me to think otherwise. And that's how I tend to think of FloWater and the mission, which is that's a strongly held conviction. What we're doing is an undeniable, strongly held conviction. How we get there is a loosely held conviction, which is I think I know, but we're going to be malleable along the way and pivot. And if I'm wrong on something, I'm going to just like cut to the chase and be like, man, I was wrong on that. Let's do something else.
I love it. Little known fact, Peter Attia actually trained at Fitness Quest 10 when he lived in San Diego.
Get out of here.
Yeah, he trained here.
Are you serious?
Before he was the Peter Attia that everyone sees him online now.
Well, you're what created that. Yeah. I mean, you were like catalyst.
I don't take any credit for that.
I'll give you some credit for that.
I don't take any credit for that, but then he's obviously in Texas. Now he's outside of San Diego. So, and the quote, can you repeat that one more time about, I like that, but the critics never accept, that was a really good quote.
That was the gist of it. I kind of just packaged it up in my own words, but I think it was along the lines of never accept or be cautious about advice from people that do not have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to go back to the show notes and
throw it in there. I take notes myself, by the way, y'all listen, because I learn a lot on the podcast, but I like that because only you, when you make a decision, you're the one who has to live with it. But if you're making the decision based on someone else, they gave you their input and they moved on.
Right.
And you don't have to sit and lay with that. And man, like why'd I listen to him or her when I should have just listened to my gut? Or I think it's great to get feedback and wisdom and be surrounded by, an ironclad group of inner circle people. But ultimately, if you're a decision maker, you know what I mean is you got to pull the trigger or not. And I think that spoke loud on that one. Never accept taking advice from someone that boom. That's good.
And then the reverse is true too, which is, in this, I think, has been an adjustment in my leadership style over the last 20 years. Is it's important to bring the team along with you, particularly leadership team. And so if they're going to be suffering, so to speak, or the beneficiary of whatever the decisions that are made and the consequences of those, then you sure ought to make sure that they're involved and they're able to voice along the way, even violent disagreement. They need to voice it, A, because it'll change your thinking as a leader, but then B, they need to have an outlet for that, so that when you come to the decision, like I always tell people, you have every right to tell me what you think we should do on material things. Like, I don't want someone telling me like what color the paint should be. Like, I don't need like 80 opinions on like what color the trim should be. But like on things that are material, you have a right to understand why we made decisions. You have a right and a responsibility to share in that decision making when it's appropriate and it's like relevant. You have a right to disagree with a decision, but you don't have a right, after we've called it, you don't have the right to not support it. That's the one right you don't have if you're going to play on a team. So you can disagree with a decision. Say, look, I have this with my team, my bosses over the years. I might say, you know what? I wouldn't do that, but I'm going to go like crazy and make that happen because that's what you want to do. That's what the board decided. Or that's, there's certain times where you might be at odds with that. But I think that's where letting people vocalize that have to suffer the consequence, for better or worse, is an important part of that process.
Yeah, that's good. So talk more on leadership. I think it's a great topic, and you're a great leader. What do you think characterizes a great leader today, in today's culture?
I would say, one, a level of authenticity. I just saw a news report. I don't know. I was on social media, so I don't know what the source is, but it had the most trusted and the least trusted professions as of 2025. And I noted it because nurses were number one. So that like stood out to me because my oldest daughter, Royce, just graduated from Colorado Christian University this summer, and she got a job in Minneapolis at a teaching hospital working as a nurse. So I sent it on to her, and I kind of took note of that. The other one that I took note of were CEOs were really low on the list. So those were the two that stood out to me. And then there's some other interesting ones in between. So I think CEOs were like third or fourth from the bottom. I mean, down there with politicians. And so authenticity, transparency, truth speaking, and I think that, and you could define it as like character, of course, but I think there is something about, you can have good character, but if you're not authentic or transparent, maybe someone doesn't ever feel that character, or they don't understand it, or they don't trust it. So I think trust is a really big one. And so, I'm trying to be careful not to use any of my New York City English on this podcast.
Are you from New York?
No, I lived in New York for a while.
Okay,
yeah, so actually 3 blocks south of the World Trade Center during that whole event. But so I picked up a lot of language that I'm trying to deprogram. That's slowly happening.
I'm from New Jersey. I understand.
Oh, okay, got it. So, just going. Where were we? Sorry, I already lost track.
Leadership, the character,
the character,
yeah.
the trust, right?
Yeah.
So, I think this is one of those things where you think about people speaking truth and trust. My hot button in the organization is if I feel like someone's BSing or spinning, that is a hot button. And there's 2 reasons. So one is it breaks trust, but the second is it's slowing us down, right? I mean, it's a little bit like if you're coaching a team on the football field or the soccer field, it's hard enough if you're playing against the team and you know what's going on. But if someone's telling you a different story than what's actually going on and you're trying to adjust to that, then you have a problem, right? And so that's a really big one for me. I think the ability to pull together and hire, modify, fire people that are not in the right seats in the organization, like that's just a leader's responsibility. And there's areas where I think I've been successful at that. There's areas where I've dropped the ball.
How have you changed the most, do you believe, as a leader in the last 13 years? Or have you improved the most or learned the most?
I think that I've learned, I'm smiling as I say this because I think my current team might not see this as much as if someone that's seen me and known me for 20, 30 years. I think I've learned to throttle my ambition and direct it and my confidence interval or my involvement. I think I've learned to throttle that in ways that I was less capable or at times incapable of doing early in my career. And so what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. When I was 20, I think I was running my first company when I was 26, 27. And I didn't know anything. Like nobody, well, everyone else probably knew I didn't know anything, but I didn't know that they didn't know that I didn't know what I was doing.
You
But
thought
I thought
you probably did at the time, even though right now you're like,
100% I did, right? But I did it in retrospect.
Right.
And so it was hard to say, oh man, I effed that up. I screwed that up. That's on me. That's on me. And now it's really easy. I mean, I feel like I say this, if you were to talk to my leadership team, I think they'd probably say, yeah, he says that, 20, 30 times a year, like where it's like, sometimes a small thing, but sometimes big things where I'm like, hey, this is my call. I called it. If anyone wants to be PO'd at anybody about it, you can be mad at me about it because that was my call. But next, move on. And so that, I think, the acknowledging my mistakes and failures and not being threatened by it, but being freed by that and feeling, there's a lot of grace that people will extend to you in life. I think the time people are just irritated. People don't take responsibility anymore.
Right.
I mean, it's like, it's just
absolutely.
I think extreme accountability and responsibility is a really important characteristic of leadership. And I do not think I know I was not good at that. I was good at taking the responsibility, but it was hard for me to narrate it. It was hard for me to acknowledge like where I misfired or to say, hey, look, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I own it. I'm going to fix it.
Talk about what you're doing, like growth-wise, scaling your company, and how do you scale? It's something that at Fitness Quest 10 and 25 years here at FQ10 and scaling impact, now we're literally, figuratively, literally doing that now with Impact X Performance and scaling that nationwide with, gyms and a coaching company that with fitness and recovery and life coaching and faith. How have you found to best scale your company over 13 years? Is it the people?
That's exactly it. Which is, here's a parallel story that ties perfectly to what you're asking, which is, I used to think, hey, we need to communicate the values of the organization or the characteristics of the company so that people can adopt those and live by them or instill them. Now I think of it very differently. Now I think we need to find the people who line up with these values and characteristics and let them loose. Because I don't think I can embed a value in somebody. I used to think I could. I thought like, hey, like I can, and I can do it in like little micro doses. It's not enduring. Like that's an inside job, right? Like so.
That's
spiritually, great. God, the universe, whatever people believe in, that transformation can occur. You and I can be sparks for that. Other people can be sparks for that. But that really is an inside job. So my answer is, when I think about how do we not only preserve but protect and grow the culture of the company and one of mission drivenness, accountability, truth telling, having, trying to make the right decision. Again, I've made many mistakes along the way, so many mistakes. Being accountable for results, putting points on the board. It's finding those people that are already wired that way, that are part of the team. Like a lot of it is team chemistry. So when I think about hiring, I think of two things. So that, everyone has like, here are 10 things that I hire for. Here's my list of 15, or here's my like 6 by. I have 2. I literally have 2. And the halo is they have to be wired around the mission. So that's just a truism for this business. I think of competency and chemistry. Characters, like that's table stakes to me as well. Is nobody's perfect. People are going to make bad mistakes, but like at their core, do they have good character? So competency, chemistry. Competency is, are they in the top 20th percentile in what they do? Are they in the top 20th percentile, best of the best in their respective area? That's one question. The second one is chemistry. The way I define that is when I see their name pop up on caller ID, do I want to answer the phone? It's kind of that simple, right? Because we've all had those people that have called us who are like, oh man, I don't want to take that. I mean, there's other things related to chemistry, but it's team dynamics, right? Absolutely. It's like, hey, when I get into a room with them, am I energized? And are we creating together? Or is it addition versus subtraction? And chemistry is often not talked about very often. You can't just have great chemistry without competency, though. They have to be competent in their role, and they can't be all about the mission. I've made this mistake before where people are so passionate about the mission that I lost sight of the fact that they were just not that competent in the role that we needed them to be competent in. But I was just so geeked that they were on fire for the mission that I overlooked that part of it. So those two things are the fundamental.
Yeah. Guys, I don't know if you're enjoying this as much as I am, but this is like business 505 here. Like, I know it seems simple, but what Raz is saying with leadership, hiring, scaling, these questions to ask, I don't know if I've ever heard it so simple in the sense of hiring, because, hey, we have 52 questions we asked during interviews. And I know someone who works with you, he said he's had 7 steps before he even got to you as the CEO of the company. Are they wired around the mission, number one? Yes or no? If no, they're out, right?
Right.
And competency and chemistry. It seems simple, but it's not. But that's how you get down to your top people, and your people are what you just said about scaling your mission and what you do. Huge. Man, this is great, Raz.
And by the way, just on this piece of like, how do you evaluate? And this is just, I feel like none of this is. I wish this were all original thought, but I feel like this is all learned or best practices that I've taken from other people.
Wisdom.
And yeah, exactly. So the best indicator of future behavior is past performance. So when I look at like the chemistry, the competency, it's not what they say, it's what they've done, because that is going to be the best indicator of how they're going to behave going forward. Right.
Last question on the entrepreneurship side, and use the context of FloWater, but right now in your life with all going on, you have a lot of different things happening, opportunities as you grow. Where is your mind at right now in early 2025 as we record this? What's your focus on? I always say, like, what are your big 5 for the year? Or, what are those 1 or 2 BHAGs? If there's like one focus that you're like, hey, I really want to focus my time, energy, investing it here. Is there one area of your business that you're like, man, I want to take my time because I can't do it all, and I've got 80 people I've got to oversee? Is it more on like the leadership side? Is it more on helping the sales system and the sales process to get the word out? What would be your focus on where you're at?
And specifically on the business side, right?
Yeah.
One is to be a voice for the problems that we have with America's tap water and what we can do, what all of us, listeners, consumers, PTA, moms and dads, business owners, gym owners, what we can do to radically shift the face of drinking water in America today, and to be a voice. Because when people learn that they're drinking a credit card's worth of plastic every week, when they recognize that there's no federal mandate for lead testing in schools, when they realize that the Safe Drinking Water Act only covers 94 out of tens of thousands of chemicals, you start to realize, hey, we have a fundamental issue. It's not a right issue or a left issue politically. This is a nonpartisan issue that neither party wants to touch because it can't be solved in 1, 2, or 3 terms. This is the hot potato that has been pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And now we're at a cataclysmic point where we need to do something dramatic, and that ends up being a part of my voice to raise a level of consciousness and awareness, not only of the problems, but also what the solutions are. Some of these solutions we need to start today, otherwise tomorrow will never come. And those might materialize in 10, 20, 30 years, like water infrastructure, putting water into municipal water treatment plants and redeveloping those. Others are solutions that we can apply today. That's why we developed FloWater. FloWater is using today's technology to solve today's problems while we also work on all the other infrastructure things. And so being a voice for that, number one. Number two, I look at a big part of my responsibility of leadership development and then distillation of that to, if I hire the right people, I right now, my executive leadership team, it's never been more dialed in than I've had in 10 plus years. And so, my job now is to support them, turn them loose, make sure that they understand what the strategies are, objectives, but then also let them go do their thing, and also to get out of the way or solve problems. Like when I talk to people that are in the field, one of my first questions I ask them is, what are 3 problems that you wish could go away today that you would change if you were a CEO? Because part of my job is, if they're in the right seat and they're performing, then part of my job ends up being remove friction and make their job easier to do. Now, if they're not performing, then there's other pieces. Like, is it friction? Is it their expectations? Is it quota setting? Whatever it is. So that's a big one for the business.
I love it.
And then strategic partnerships, strat partnerships, business development, growth. I mean, the way that this changes, it's a little bit like Wi-Fi in hotels. So once upon a time, you had to pay for Wi-Fi at every hotel you ever went to. Then there was a brand, I think it was Hampton Inn, that actually started offering not only free breakfast, but you got free Wi-Fi. And before you know it, you can't go into a hotel anymore. I mean, you have to go to a really expensive hotel to be able to have to pay for Wi-Fi. I mean, you would be outraged. Yeah. That was a tipping point, right? And that tipping point came not as just like a few individual or regional hotels doing it, but it became chains of hotels that suddenly said, hey, this is table stakes. You walk in somewhere, you expect to be able to have clean drinking water. You expect to have FloWater or a product like FloWater.
That's interesting. That happened quick. I just think about that.
It did. It happened super quick.
Right.
I never thought about it like that. These in the tipping point.
I never thought about it like that. But you're right. I haven't paid Wi-Fi in a long time. Like a long time, meaning probably 2 years. Now everyone does that. Interesting analogy with the water. And when you say the voice, how do you become the voice? So you say, I want to be more voice. How is it?
Well,
beside this podcast, of course.
Part of it is, so, I do a number of speaking events. So Sun Valley Forum, I spoke at last year. I'm speaking at again this year, which is kind of a group of thought leaders really oriented around things tied to sustainability. There's been everything from like TEDx to other talk tracks that I'll do at either trade organizations or might be nonprofit or news media. So in fact, I just came from Atlanta where I did a couple news segments. I was doing a segment on sustainability, and the morning that we woke up, they happened to have a water line break in Atlanta. So they put a boil advisory in place. So after I finished my morning segment on kind of a playful 4-minute riff on 5 ways that you can be more sustainable this year and how we were going to help doing that through a quiz on FloWater, et cetera, they had me in a 10-minute interview talk about like what water line breaks mean and what to do with a boil advisory and why do you have to do a boil advisory and how do you what do you do during a boil advisory? Like, can you wash dishes, et cetera? So using voice to communicate our not only mission, but also our status as a society as it relates to clean drinking water and what we need to do. Media, that's one of them. The other part of it, though, is spending a lot of time with the team. Like I get juiced and excited by seeing guys like Jason and spending time in the field. One of the best days that I've had in the last year, there's a guy named Angel Soto. He was the very first person that we hired at FloWater. So he's first hire. Wow. Officially. And he's here in Los Angeles and he's a tech. And the best day that I had in the last year was him and I going out, riding in the field, him taking me on filter changes, installing FloWater units. I mean, we had a blast, but that's where the magic happens. The magic happens. I always tell my team, nothing happens in this business, period, full stop, end of story, until something gets sold. and then a unit gets deployed and that consumer has a great experience. What's that boil it down to? That's the person on the front lines that's introducing the product to the customer, and then that's the technician that's installing that product to the customer. That is the underpinning of our business. It's not me. It's not no executive muckety muck. This is a business that transforms in the trenches by having conversations and interactions, and then ultimately having a great product experience where people like this. It was on this, I told you about the podcast I was on for like 10-minute office hours yesterday. It was basically 10 minutes of them talking about how big of a FloWater fan they are, in much the same way that you described it earlier. So we get that product experience done, then the rest of our job becomes easy. And so that is an area where I like spending my time.
Yeah, well, what I didn't share earlier on, not only did we have a great experience when your tech came and installed it here, one of the ways I always assess if something's working or not is just, not does it taste good, because I can give a lot of people things that taste good, and is it healthy for you? It's after a new product, even if it's a fitness product, like a piece of machinery, I want to know, is it going to work or not? So if we take either a prototype or we have something on Len for 3 months to see, what are the people saying? What are our staff saying? And what are our clients and members saying? And I got to tell you something, Raz. In the month plus that we've had the FloWater, one of my goals has always been to get more of our staff from downstairs up here to the roots, because this is the roots. This is where we start our business. I'm like, hey, guys, come visit up top. This is where all the action happens, and you get stuck in where you're at. I put the FloWater in there. We have the majority of our staff alone coming up here 2 or 3 times a day just to refill their water bottles. I'm like, good. Now you got to hit some push-ups and arms with that, but this is bringing people up to the spot. Like, it's like horses coming to the trough, like on that. Right. And our members are like, hey, where'd you get this thing? They've never seen it before, right? So they're like, hey, where'd you get this thing? I'm like, just keep enjoying it. Get a bottle, bring it home, and enjoy it. And I don't think I've ever had a product that people have quacked about and talked about as much.
What do you hear them say when they talk about it? How do they describe it?
Taste. I love the taste.
They love taste.
They love the taste. And I show them the 7-step filter process, and they get hung up on the coconut. They think it's coconut water. I'm like, it's not coconut water, but there is a coconut filter in there, and it helps it taste good. And it's I go through all the steps of just educating them about what the product is. But I guess the point is, when you're trying to draw your community together, your staff, your team, it's been awesome to say, guys, if we represent the best, then have the best.
Yeah.
If we want to, everything we have, the equipment, the experience, not only at FQ10 but at Impact X Performance, guys, let's have the best. Then what I've just recently found is FloWater and what you guys are doing on that. So huge kudos and shout out to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's a group of 80 people that I get to work with that are super committed to this. There are a group of 10,000 customers that are part of this transformation, and then a lot of people that have cheered us along the way. I got a quick story for you, talking just about like mistakes, failed attempts at execution. So 2015, we got in a room and we're like, hey, we need a slogan for FloWater. Like, we need something, Smart Water has like their slogan and Aquafina has theirs. So we're like, well, we need like a really quippy, catchy, clever slogan, and we'll tell everybody what it is and they're going to love it. And so we came up with, we had an agency involved, and, like 5 people, there were probably only 8 people in the company at that point, but we had like 60% of the company involved in this decision, which wasn't many at the time again. And we came up with naturally brilliant water. And we thought, this is so clever. Like, it's natural, it's brilliant, it's like better than smart water, and then it says water. So it's like literal. So we thought, oh, this is like such a great tagline. We're going to be huge as a result of this tagline. So we put it on all these panels. So like, you have the top and the bottom panel. It says FloWater at the top, and it says naturally brilliant water at the bottom. And we put it on all these panels. And I remember I still to this day talk to a ton of customers. If I see a FloWater in the market, I'll like go talk to the customer. What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? I won't tell them who I am till after. I just like hearing. And so I went and talked to, 100 different customers, hundreds of consumers. And I came back to the office. I was like, guys, not one person said anything. No one says this is naturally brilliant. No one talks like this. This is not even in the vernacular of like humanity. Like, what are we thinking? And they're like, well, what are they saying? I was like, well, actually, this is interesting. What they're saying is, this is the world's best tasting water. So I was like, why don't we just like scrap our clever idea and just use what they're saying and apply that? And that's what we use now, which is world's best tasting water. And that didn't come from us, but that just came from like stories like you told, where the people say, hey, this stuff tastes amazing.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can outsmart yourself to
Literally,
detriment.
literally hiring agencies.
How brilliant myself.
Oh my gosh, we all know those stories. Yeah. So let's put just the magic wand here and move forward. I don't know. Let's say 10 years. Where do you see the company in 10 years? Where do you see the world in 10 years with all this talk about water and where it's going? Like, what is your hope that people are going to say about the impact? Pardon the pun, impact. This is the Impact Show, the impact of FloWater. And what message do you hope to leave in, let's just say, 10 years?
Well, what's really important to me is not only the restoration of tap water and starting in the United States, but also globally. I mean, there's many issues that we are well aware of, and many that people are not aware of that exist globally, whether that is in first, second, or third world countries, right? Mm-hmm. And so, if we start with the fundamental human right to clean drinking water, it's a manifestation of that. It's that statement becoming true, which is what would be a fantastic outcome 10 years from now, or a point in time, right? And so I think none of this, there's no actual point in time where it suddenly snaps and this happens, but it's materialization over time where we drive water equality to the people that they need it the most. And so that in the process, in doing that the right way, it's providing a way to do that eliminates or unwraps the plastic, right? Yeah. We need to be able to deliver this to people unwrapped in plastic, because it's not only bad for the environment, it's horrible for your health. It's terrible for your health. So if we can do that and have a dent in that, when I say if we can do that, if we can be the catalyst and have put a dent in this big problem and be seen as a brand that was emerging in a David and Goliath scenario that ended up slaying the giant, but not necessarily becoming the giant. It just ends up being the catalyst to a movement. That would be a great outcome. That would make me feel great. The second part of it is seeing the team win. I mean, I think I tend to, when I have built this business, I've tended to think of units of one. And when I say units of one, I mean, I look at the economics and the production and the quality of one refill station. Like, how do we do this on a unit of one where this is the best of the best of the best at a fair price for $5 a day? Someone can have a transformational experience with water. Okay, if we can do that, then the thing can scale. If I can have it make sense on a unit of one. Same thing goes with a customer, right? Same thing goes with a consumer, a student going in, hydrating out of school. The same thing goes with an individual employee. Like I talk about Angel, I think about unit of one of how does Angel's life, how does his purpose get fulfilled in FloWater, and what can we do to help unlock it? This is not his capital THE purpose. Like, this should not be. There have been times where I've made this too much of my purpose. Like, that's part of the danger of my ambition that God is helping me throttle somewhat voluntarily and sometimes involuntarily, right? And so, I get it. Certainly part of your work life should be about fulfilling your purpose. Like, that is part of our purpose. And so seeing that happen on a unit of one, so to speak, right? The customer, the consumer, the teammate, that's important to me over the next 10 years.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. It's good to have people like you out there spreading the word and the gospel of one of the basic foundational elements of life, water, and good water. And what you guys are doing truly is impactful. And Raz, I want to thank you for flying in today for the show.
My pleasure,
man, and being here live. I know you're a busy man. Where can someone follow up with you, contact, follow FloWater? What's the best ways that someone can get more involved with FloWater?
Got a few things. So one is that for anyone that's listening that has a business or a school, corporation, company, warehouse, if you go to our website, drinkflowwater.com, and you fill out get a quote, and in the notes, just write Todd Podcast, or you can use a discount code. Actually, I think when you're checking out, it says Todd. You'll get 50% off delivery and install.
Let's go.
The other piece I would suggest is, I'm kind of saying this on the fly, but we can make this work, which is, hey, you might not be the administrator at your school, but you might be a parent of a kid who pays the taxes to send your kid to that school. And if you want to ensure that your kid going to school or other people's kids have access to clean drinking water that they can trust, just let us know what that school is and we'll contact them on your behalf as well. So, if you go to a hotel and there's a certain hotel or gym that you frequent, we'd be happy to do that as well. We can't make any guarantees, but we certainly can advocate for that. So one is any of your listeners will get a 50% off delivery and install using the Todd code or just putting that in the notes. In terms of accessing us, again, that's drinkflowwater.com, 1W, FloWater. You can find us on socials at Drink FloWater, and then personally at Rich Razgaitis on most socials. So at Drink FloWater, at Rich Razgaitis.
And Drink FloWater, is it FLO 1W?
Yes, 1W.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just to be clear. So
it's an important distinction, actually, for reasons that you might.
Right?
Yeah.
Although I can't find the link. We'll put all of that in the show notes today for y'all, so you can download all of the great information that Raz just dropped on us. So, man,
hey, thank you
so much.
you have such fantastic energy, and just even seeing you interact with everyone here, you can just tell. You can tell when you meet somebody the composition of their character, their intent. It's great.
Well, ditto.
It's a pleasure to be in your presence.
Right back at you, man, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
God bless you, brother.
Thank you. You too.